Welcome to On Par with the President. Joining me today is Dr. Jason Cormier, a neurosurgeon, Louisiana native, and former LSU student athlete playing basketball under Coach Dale Brown. As a physician, he is an international expert in brain injury and concussion. Well, we're going to get right at it. Did you know when you were a student at LSU that you would become a doctor at this point in your life?
I didn't really have a good idea. I was always relatively good and solid when it came to the sciences, but my goal was to play a few years in college and ultimately try out for the NBA. I didn't realize I was going to be a doctor just immediately.
So talk about your LSU experience. What did you enjoy about your time here at LSU?
LSU is one of those institutions that's homegrown just from the beginning. I remember late nights watching Coach Brown, coach the Tigers to different championships, and always had the dreams of one day wearing the LSU jersey. And when I got there, it was more than I could have ever imagined, just in terms of the support, the fun, the community, the student body, how they got behind the athletes, and really the tutors that were put in place as a student athlete to try to help us succeed. And so my time at LSU was very good. It was a very good learning experience, and I still have friends from those experiences today.
It's awesome. So how did you decide upon the neurosurgery specialty?
It's interesting. I worked at the Baton Rouge General Hospital when I was kind of later on during my school years at LSU after basketball, and I was a transporter. And as a transporter at Baton Rouge General, I was able to work with some of the surgeons, general surgery, cardiovascular surgery, and ultimately neurosurgery. And that really spearheaded my decision ultimately to go into medicine, because I looked at doctors like they were my heroes, and I wanted to be there for patients in their moments of need. And so going through med school, really, I was geared towards, or most interested in, thoracic surgery. And really into my third year, it just wasn't quite as fulfilling as I thought it would be. And I felt like I was traveling that path for the wrong reasons. And so in my fourth year beginning, I did a few rotations, one particularly in neurology and neurosurgery. And neurosurgery reminded me that you can go anywhere in the body that you want to. You can work with the nervous system, you can work with the vascular system. And that ended up with a conversation I had with Najib Thomas, who was one of the surgeons that I had a pleasure of meeting a few times. He said, you're only going to be as good as your last complication. And that resonated so well with me. I had a conversation with my best friend at the time, and that really kind of did it. And neurosurgery is where I ended up. And I feel privileged, and I've never looked back.
You've taken a special interest in traumatic brain injuries. What inspired you to engage that kind of medical science?
So traumatic brain injury, probably my racing association and love for racing. And so a number of people, particularly all in high contact sports, experience traumatic brain injury. It's one of those things that now we know more about it. And now as a neurosurgeon, I understand it better. So I wanted to give back. And I felt like if I could combine both neurosurgery, in the way of traumatic brain injury with spinal cord injuries, I would be in a greater position now, since I really still love racing. I love sports. That would be my way of giving back. And so I delved in further with Julian Bales, probably literally considered the top brain injury expert in the world. And we came upon this name of Motorsport Safety Group, and really kind of following his lead. And he's been a mentor in that segment of my interest. I delved deeper and deeper into the technologies to not only prevent brain injury, but also diagnosis and now treat it. And that's what my Motorsport Safety Group is all about.
Why practice medicine in Louisiana?
Louisiana has so many different facets, good food, good people. It's home, and there's nothing you can really replace, if you're at home in comparison to somewhere else. Let me tell you, in Louisiana, they pronounce my name the way it's supposed to be pronounced. And look, you nailed it. But Louisiana brings something to the table that I find that other states don't. They take care of their own, they welcome their own, And I've been able to do a number of things that I would not be able to do in the way of different types of high complex surgery procedures that might be challenged, that might be looked upon as, well, maybe that's a little bit too dangerous. But I've been able to do a number of things that are written about only in some textbooks, like spinal cord rotations, awake craniotomies, and they're doing some of these things in other institutions. But Louisiana has really embraced it, and I get to watch, my Tigers. I get to go to LSU. I get to watch, the football games in person and the basketball games, and be able to interact with those guys.
Well, it's very difficult to become a neurosurgeon. How do you relate the things you learned as a Division I athlete with respect to becoming a neurosurgeon and continuing in that world?
I think the way becoming a student athlete, and I can only speak from my experiences at LSU, is that time management was a big deal. Mike Mallett was a big proponent of that. So was Coach Brown and the other coaches under him. And time management is really how you are able to hone in on what you need to do scholastically. And so if you're able to balance sports as well as your academics, then med school really isn't that difficult. By the time I got to med school, I didn't feel like it was really all that difficult, to be honest with you, because I didn't have to balance the rigors of sports and all that. It was mainly getting in, studying, doing what you had to do. And then the wear and tear of just competing as an athlete, your body was also conditioned to go into long hours of studying. So that made it all very manageable and realistic to me to be able to go through the rigors of medical school.
Well, you mentioned Coach Brown. Are there any other things that you learned from him that you still apply today in your day-to-day life?
Coach Brown wrote this book. It was called Don't Count Me Out. And he was always one of those guys that would send us different sayings to just kind of keep us uplifted. And I remember when we played Georgetown in the Superdome, and we were just already, it was already said we were going to be annihilated. And Coach Brown came into the locker room. He said before the game, tomorrow the newspaper's going to say Tigers stun Hoyas. And never forget that. And so we walked out, and of course we had some really good guys on the team, but they were really, talent for talent, we were outmanned. And we beat them by 2 points in a sold-out crowd in the Superdome, several thousands of people. And literally the newspaper the next day said, Tigers stun Hoyas. And so memorable things like that, what he said, he always spoke from the hip. The coaches underneath him, Coach Abernathy, Coach Johnny Jones, those are just a whole composite of what the LSU athletics had to offer. And then you move over to baseball and Skip Bertman. So all these different memories of how athletics were able to just carry themselves to the next level because of those teachings, because of the ability of the athletes to buy in to not only from an athletic standpoint, but also from a scholastic standpoint. I was very proud to be there and proud of where I am today because of it.
Well, that had to be a high pressure situation. You're going to play Georgetown in Louisiana. You handle high pressure situations and injuries all the time. How do you manage that in terms of your work in neurosurgery and the brain injuries you're trying to impact?
Well, I tell you, it's a good question. And when I've thought about this oftentimes, I invite stress. And so I really thrive. I find myself that I'm a person that thrives on stress. And I think it's one of those things, I was a point guard at LSU, didn't get much playing time because I was playing behind Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf, who is just, a genius at basketball. No one could ever stop him. Even the likes of Michael Jordan comment on him because he scored 39 points on him one time. So, when playing under that, you still want to have the ball in your hands when there's 3 seconds left on the clock, regardless if you played or not. We're all competing at a high level. So for neurosurgery, I bring that same sort of, mentality. And that if you're in dire need of my help, you want to be on my table because I'm going to do all I can to save your life.
Well, you work on the human brain, this complex machine, biological wonder. If you had to say one thing about the brain for someone who's just wants an insight from an expert, what would you say to them about the brain?
Wow, one thing.
Just give me two.
Yeah. So I would say that, the brain I think is the most fascinating organ that we have because it's able to do what machines will never be able to do. I think because there's emotion, the brain can feel, the brain can think, and it has thoughts, and it controls your overall personality. And I think that, when you think about the brain and over 86 billion cells, and those cells are based on function, form, and connectivity, that when you think about things like AI and the rise of artificial intelligence, people don't realize that you need really big supercomputers that are only found in certain places in the world that are able to deal with computers that are based on probability that are scary, in my opinion. Whereas the brain, we don't need that. We don't need that. The supercomputers, that is your brain, and the cooling systems are in your brain. We're able to do much more than AI can do ever. And we don't burn the energy that these machines are actually burning. So I think that the brain is so fascinating that we're able to operate on the brain while you're wide awake, because the brain doesn't feel pain; it only interprets pain. So there are several times I do awake craniotomies, and I allow the families to speak to the patient while they're on the table during the operating room, and it helps to bring them in the operating room, and it helps the outcomes a lot more.
So people actually get to watch the surgeries?
So the families don't, they get to speak to them.
Okay.
And so usually the anesthesiologist will have the family on like a speakerphone, and they'll speak to them while I'm actually resecting the tumor. Or if I'm doing an intraoperative brain mapping. So that's a very, very common thing here that we do. Now I do have students that come in and actually watch the procedures. Residents come in and watch the procedures, and they get to see a real live living brain and how we interact with it, and utilizing the different neuronavigational techniques that we utilize to get to these different areas of pathology, whether it's a tumor or some sort of epilepsy surgery.
Outstanding to hear. Now, if you had to outline your greatest contribution to the field of neurology, what would you say? And don't be humble. I know a lot of folks like to be humble on the podcast, but we want to hear your thoughts on the very best that you think you've done for the field.
I think, me personally, I'm a one that will still put their hands on patients. There are a number of physicians that don't do that. A person will walk into their office or walk into their exam room, and they'll look at x-rays and they'll send them on their way. I get to know my patients. I put my hands on them. I talk to them. I get to know, how many members do you have in your family, kids and whatnot. So I think I bring that hands-on, down home, really personal feel to the surgery. I think I operate on friends, people that I know. The next thing from a medical standpoint, I think I've brought to neurosurgery those things of preventing brain injury and technologies engaging the industry like Q30 and the Q collar, which has been shown to help concussions by over 80%. From a detective standpoint, a diagnostic standpoint, I've engaged technologies to be able to accurately diagnose concussions, and then also from a treatment standpoint. And so I think I've brought those things to neurosurgery, and I got into neurosurgery because I wanted to change it and make it better. I hope that I have. There are other surgeons that are much brighter than I am that they've provided some contributions as well that I would argue are a lot greater. But I think that's what I've brought to neurosurgery, and I hope to continue that.
So you've been working to mitigate head injuries in sport. What have you done in terms of your work with college or professional football to prevent head injuries?
The Q collar is it's a company by the name of Q30 Innovations, and basically it's based on the physiology of the woodpecker and the battle ram. A woodpecker can generate 1,200 to 1,500 Gs every time it strikes that tree, and what it does, people probably don't know this, but the tongue wraps around the head of the brain of the woodpecker before it exits its mouth. Whereas the battle ram, what we have in common is something called the omohyoid ligament. It sits right underneath your jaw. And what happens is every time you yawn, you mildly obstruct a small amount of blood that drains from your head. You don't completely obstruct it, but there's a mild amount. So you have an extra few mils of blood inside your brain. So it prevents the slosh effect. So it's almost like filling a glass of water, sealing it, and then trying to shake it. And essentially that protects the slosh of the movement of the brain inside the skull. So what you have is you've kind of created a bubble wrap or a cushioning of the brain inside the skull. And that's been something that now a number of college football players are wearing, NFL players are wearing. You can see it on Sundays now. Now basketball players are wearing it. A lot of the female basketball players are wearing it. And in other sports, it's kind of just trickled down. And so that's really helped a lot of athletes that have been stricken with brain injury, concussions, dizziness, headaches, you name it. And a lot of these things are working, and we know this from third party acquisitions of studies that have been conducted.
One other question for you that is related to something I've asked you already. How do you maintain a healthy brain?
Wow. So do as I say, not as I do. I guess that's probably the safest thing to do. I would always tell you that sleep is good. I don't sleep that much, but making sure you get good rest, exercise, and tax your brain. And what I mean by that is read or write something every single day, educate yourself, keep your mind in motion, and look to encounter new educational tasks. And so I think intermittent meditation is great, but I can't say enough about, a balanced diet, exercising, 3 to 4 times a week, making sure you have good people around you. So good surroundings, being in nature whenever you can, being accountable, and ultimately, living your life to the fullest, not engaging in things that are dangerous unless you're truly passionate about it. And I think those things are, crossword puzzles are always good. Don't engage in all 35 different supplements. There's only 1 or 2 good ones you actually need. I think the body's going to get rid of whatever it is you don't need. So what you put in your body, if it's poison, it's going to go right out.
So now you said 1 or 2. I'm sorry, I've got to stop you. Everybody's going to say you didn't ask him which 2.
So I think that things are proven. So I will tell you that omega-3 fatty acids have been proven. I sit on one of the boards of a company called Brain Armor, and they have proven studies in terms of brain injury as well as cognition. And you can also test for your omega-3 fatty acid index, and it'll show you in different areas just how omega-3 fatty acids help, just in terms of helping just with the brain, in general. And there's also another a company I'm not associated with that I believe in. It's called Onnit, ONIT, and they have some supplements within that I've actually shown that I believe in, that actually help. Bulkova Moneri is one of those components of that. And so I think those are the 2 that I really like and that I support, that I've seen, it's really some peer-to-peer reviewed studies on. A lot of other things that you see out there really haven't been peer-to-peer reviewed and proven.
All right, we're going to have a little bit of fun. I read that you also are a race car driver. How did you get into that? And what gives you comfort to do that with all that you just talked to us about in terms of, keeping the brain healthy? That's
a great question. And my brother, John, is the fault for that. My brother, John, drives fast, and that's where it all started. But, racing, racing starts before you get in a car or before you get behind, a motorcycle or the handlebars of a motorcycle. It starts for us. It was who could race, who could brush their teeth the quickest. Right? Who could get to the light switch the quickest? And so that's where it started when we were 5, 6, or 7 years old. And I think race car drivers would tell you the same thing as well. And so by the time I got to racing, it was like it was already said and done. And I think that so racing for me, it's peaceful. You can't get a speeding ticket. And I think if you compare, would I rather drive fast in traffic, which I wouldn't do? It's actually safer to drive on a race car in a racetrack because those drivers know what they're doing. And they know how to get around you. They're not, a novice that might be text messaging or drinking or doing certain things that they shouldn't be doing. And plus you have protective gear on. So I think for racing, for me, for those segments of it, I find peace in it. It's exhilarating. It's you against the machine. I like the fact that you can push the machine to the limits and then nudge it even more. And I'm a kind of I love the stress of many things. I compare that to neurosurgery. And I think racing's kind of the same way for me. So being able to push a machine to about 180, 190 miles per hour around a curve, I think that's exhilarating. And again, you're on the track with people that know how to drive, not in 5 o'clock traffic when people are text messaging.
All right. Now you really set this up here. So Playing Division I basketball, brain surgery, or race car driver? Which one brings you more happiness?
I am blessed to say that I look forward to each one because, wow, if I had to choose, it would be difficult. It'd have to be, what would I choose on the weekend? Well, probably racing. What would I choose during the week? Well, neurosurgery. Unless someone called, then I would have to include that as well. Basketball has been a love. I follow it. And would I do this all over again? Absolutely. And I think one feeds off the other. And if I didn't do one of those things, I wouldn't be who I am and where I am today. So I guess I would, if I were a student looking at the things that I did, I'm an average human being, and my book is about failures and overcoming that. I think it all came together, and I don't think that I would be a neurosurgeon if it wasn't for basketball, if it wasn't for music, if it wasn't for racing. I wouldn't be a race car driver if it wasn't for basketball, wasn't for music. So all those things come together, and it's kind of the perfect marriage that made me who I am today. I can't say enough about God, my family, Caitlin, my fiance, and my mother, who did all they could to bring me who I am today.
Well, sir, doctor, this has been quite the treat. And if we had more time, I would get off into your music and the brain, but we don't have time. But I hope when we see each other face to face, we can have a little bit of conversation about how you see the music and the mind working together. But it's great to talk to you. Thank you for what you're doing. And your excitement about serving other people is quite powerful. And I'm glad you were LSU Tiger as a basketball player, and that stimulated you to go on to your current career. It's a wonderful example of what the student-athlete experience could birth. So we greatly appreciate you, sir.
Well, Dr. Tate, thank you for letting me share a piece of my story. It's always a privilege, and I'm proud to be here, and I'm so proud of everything you're doing. Thank you.